Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I think, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Shipla for starting this wonderful webinar for all the pediatricians. It is certainly going to help us in day-to-day practice. So today I'm going to discuss about the neonatal resuscitation, what is new. So I'm Dr. Kumar Ankur. I am a senior consultant and in charge of neonatology at BL Kapoor's Hospital at Delhi. And I'm also the Joint Secretary and Treasurer NNF State Delhi branch. So first I would like to disclose. So my presentation would be based on mainly in American Academy of Pediatrics NNF, NRP guideline 2015, and also mainly based on the NNF NRP India neonatal resuscitation guideline, which was published in the month 2019 December. And some of the future changes would be based on ALCOR 2019. And I'm going to discuss also about if the mother is having COVID positive, in that case, what should be the resuscitation? And that is based on NNF FOXI guideline, which was last published on 7th of May 2020. And many of the pictures were taken from the Dr. Satyan Lakshmi Narasimha. So the objective of today's talk would be that we'll try to discuss on a case-based scenario, what should be the routine care and what are the new things in the routine care. If the baby is born with meconium Steinleicher and if they are non-vigorous, what should be the resuscitation protocol, and what are the preterm bundle, specifically if we are talking about less than 32 weeks. And suppose if baby is not breathing, what should be the resuscitation scenario? And if any baby born to COVID suspect or positive mother, what is the current resuscitation guideline by the NNF India? So certain topic I would also discuss about new research, which is probably going to change the resuscitation guideline by 1 or 2 years after 2020. So we should know the anticipations for the need for resuscitations. If you look at the data, so most of the baby don't require resuscitation, that is in the range of 90%. However, 5% baby require just initial steps, and only advanced resuscitation is required only in less than 1% of the baby, and 3% of the baby would require positive pressure ventilations. That means most of the baby would require no active resuscitation, and advanced resuscitation would require only in less than 1% of the neonate. So if you are going for any delivery, so there are certain things we have to prepare ourselves and our teams, and we have to brief our team what is going to happen. So for that, we start with antenatal counseling. Suppose in the case, if the baby is going to born preterm, what would be the outcome at the delivery room area, and beyond delivery room, like in NICU, what would be the short-term and long-term outcome? So we have to discuss with the parents, with the obstetricians beforehand. And before delivery, we should ask at least 4 questions from the obstetricians. That is, whether the baby is born preterm or term, what is the amniotic fluid? Is it clear, bloody, or mixed with meconium? How many babies? It's going to be a singleton or multiple pregnancy or any other maternal risk factor. So in that case, beforehand, we should know that what are the risk factors so that we can prepare our team. Resuscitation and briefing should be done before that only. And after that, we should check the equipments. So be the equipment checkup or the need for resuscitation would be based on this flow diagram, that is TABCD: temperature, airway, breathing, circulation, and drug. So once we enter the labor room, we have to check the room temperature, and as well as beforehand, we have to start the warmer at least 20 to 30 minutes before and set the temperature to a maximum output. We would need a 2 to 3 pre-warm linen, and in case of preterm, we also need a plastic wrap. So for airway, we would need a suction catheter, 8 or 10. We have to set the suction pressure, and sometimes to clear the airway and position the airway, we need a shoulder roll. And for breathing apparatus, we also need a flow, that is, we need a oxygen blender, oxygen tubing, T-piece resuscitator, and if not, bag and mask, self-inflating bag. We also need a pulse oximeter. For heart rate monitoring, we need a stethoscope. And for prolonged resuscitation and chest compression, we'd also require an intubation laryngoscope, 2.5, 3.5 endotracheal tubes. And for the drugs, we need only adrenaline and the normal saline. So when we are preparing adrenaline, we have to prepare it before the delivery. And ideally, we should prepare with first taking normal saline, 9 ml, and then add 1 ml adrenaline. Because if you are taking adrenaline first and then adding normal saline, then you can accidentally infuse more normal saline, and it is not going to be like a 1:10,000. It could be more than that. So over dilution can happen. We all know this NRP flowchart. We are not going to discuss about this flowchart because as a pediatrician in day-to-day practice, we follow this chart. But what new changes happen, we can discuss accordingly. So like in the cases of meconium aspiration syndrome, what are the new changes? In the case of FiO2 need, whether we should resuscitate with room air versus 100% oxygen, especially in preterm infants, what should be the target saturations? And the future research have shown that whether we should give an endotracheal adrenaline or not, and what should be the best way to deliver the adrenaline. Do we need a repeated dose of endotracheal adrenaline or not? What is new in the chest compression? And what is new in the cord management? Let's discuss with that. So as far as Indian NNF NRP guideline is concerned, we ask only one question: whether baby is breathing or crying. If the answer is yes, we will go for delayed cord clamping for 60 seconds. So that is called as a routine care. So the moment baby is delivered, you put the baby over the abdomen, which will maintain the temperature of the baby, and don't cut the cord for 60 seconds. By the time you can cover the baby with the pre-warm linen and change the position of the baby. And if there is some secretion, you can clear the secretions if required. And after 1 minute, you can start the breastfeeding. That is the routine care actually. And if the baby is not breathing and crying, that baby would go for initial steps. The initial steps would again contain the TABC, that means temperature, airway, breathing, and circulation. Here for temperature, we will keep the baby under warmer. And for airway, if you require, then do suctioning. And for positioning of the airway, you will require a shoulder roll. And for breathing, if after tactile stimulations, if the baby is still not breathing, then the baby would qualify for positive pressure ventilation. What is new in the tactile stimulation is that we should not flicking the soles. So sole flicking is abandoned now. We should only rub the back, thorax, and sometimes the sole also. And never we should do a flicking of the soles. So by this routine care, we should follow the skin to skin care to prevent the hypothermia, and we follow the delayed cord clamping. We as a pediatrician know the benefits of the delayed cord clamping. So if you look at the not individual studies, look at this meta-analysis based on the 18 RCTs and more than nearly 3,000 baby in less than 37-week baby, which was published in American Journal of Obstetrician 2018 January. They found that apart from other benefit, that they can decrease the 30% less mortality, hospital mortality, not only in the larger group of infants, but also in the infants, those who are less than 28 weeks. So definitely it's a very good thing, and we should follow irrespective of the gestational age, delayed cord clamping. But what about the milking? So recently, few of the studies have shown that we can do milking, because especially in the very preterm baby, because we know that 70% of the very small baby would require a resuscitation in form of initial steps or positive pressure ventilation probably. So waiting for 1 minute would probably delay the resuscitation. That's why milking was tried. But the problem with the milking was that it was shown that if you try doing milking of the cord, and especially in the extreme preterm baby, they can lead to severe intraventricular hemorrhage 2 times higher than as compared to control infants. However, they have shown that the need for blood transfusion was less. There was no improvement in the clinical outcome. One of the study by the Anup Katharia, they found that there was a lower risk of ROP requiring surgery in the group of infant who were gone through cord milking. However, because of the risk of severe IVH, milking of the cord is not recommended. We should only follow delayed cord clamping irrespective of the gestational age. So no milking in extreme preterm infants. You can see this figure because of the increased preload and because of the fragile blood vessels of the infant, because of prematurity, and sometimes because of the history of chorioamnitis, they can lead to increased intraventricular hemorrhage, and that can lead to the poor neurodevelopmental outcome. So we have discussed that if the baby is born with crying and breathing, we will follow the delayed cord clamping. What about the infant? If they don't cry immediately after birth, should we do resuscitation with intact cord, or we should immediately clamp the cord? As of now, the guidelines suggest that we have to clamp the cord immediately and start the resuscitation. But there is some theories that means if the baby is depressed, that means if the fetal hypoxia is going on, that means the baby is not getting enough blood intrauterine. And immediately after birth, if we clamp the cord, that means baby would get a less amount of fetoplacental blood in the range of 30% lesser blood. That again would lead to increased ischemia reperfusion injury and ultimately can lead to neonatal hypovolemia and can precipitate the hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. In one of the model, they also found that the risk of PPHN would be high if we clamp cord immediately. And we also know that the cord contains a lot of stem cells, and that stem cells can be neuroprotective. There are ongoing 20 trials are ongoing to look for the role of stem cell for preventing as a neuroprotective strategy in neonatal resuscitation, especially in a baby born with asphyxia. So this is one of the study which was published by the Anderson in the year 2019. It was studied at the Nepal as a part of helping babies breathe protocol. They included the infant that is late preterm and term infant. They randomized into the early cord clamping and delayed cord clamping. They continued delayed cord clamping at least for 3 minutes. What they have found, the infant falling under the delayed cord clamping group, they have a better saturation at 1 minute, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes. They have a good APGAR score, better APGAR score at 1 minute, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes. However, the heart rate at 1 and 5 minutes were lesser, but it was mean heart rate was just 106 per beat per minute. But at 10 minutes, the heart rate was same in the both group. And they also found that the infant under the delayed cord clamping achieved their cry and breathe earlier as compared to the early cord clamping. Probably in next new studies or new protocol would suggest that we can continue resuscitation with intact cord if the baby is born with no breathing or no crying. But still we have to follow the NNF guideline that we should not continue delayed cord clamping if the baby is born depressed. And now the delivery room strategy. So we know that in delivery room strategy, as a part of positive pressure ventilation, we would need a 502, some ventilation device, and there should be some ventilation strategy. So which FiO2 to start in case of baby if require resuscitation, which device is better, be it a TPC resuscitator or self-inflating bag, or in case if ventilatory strategy is required, if the baby is born with respiratory distress, what would be the better choice, the CPAP, intubation, or sustained inflation? If you look at this pictorial diagram, they have found that if you start resuscitation with the 100% FiO2, they can lead to enormous amount of release of free radicals and oxidant particles. They can damage the brain and increase the brain inflammation leading to hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. They can damage the heart. They can damage the renal tissues and ultimately increase the mortality. That is why we know that after 2010, we are following the guidelines that any term infants, 35 weeks and beyond, we should resuscitate with room air. And not only the short-term outcome, but also the long-term outcome, they have found that the risk of childhood leukemia is higher in cases if you start with higher FiO2. So that is why we start resuscitating all infants 35 weeks and beyond 35 weeks with a room air. But recent studies found that if we start resuscitating infant in a less than 32-week baby in a 21 to 30%, there was no increase in mortality. An infant 32 weeks and beyond 32 weeks, we can start resuscitating the baby with room air, 21%. There was no increase in the mortality or any form of morbidity. So the previous guideline was that infants less than 35 weeks start with resuscitation with 21 to 30%, and beyond 35 weeks it was room air. But the new guideline by the NNF NRP 2019 suggests that we should start resuscitating preterm infants if they are 32 weeks and beyond 32 weeks with room air only. And idea is that we should achieve the saturation of 80% at 5 minutes and heart rate 100 beats per minute. So this is one of the new guideline which is being implemented by the NNF India. So we know that how to monitor positive pressure ventilation, we know that the effective positive pressure ventilation means by the way of monitoring the heart rate. So there are 4 ways of monitoring the heart rate at assessment. That is why one is palpation, one is auscultation, third is pulse oximetry and ECG. If you look at the meta-analysis based on which was published in the Resuscitation 2019, they found that the palpation is the fastest and quickest method, but it sometimes underestimates the heart rate of more than 100. So that means if you monitor the heart rate and if you feel that heart rate is less than 100, then you will start the positive pressure ventilation. That means over ventilating the baby. With auscultation, it is the reliable and fastest, but it underestimates if the heart rate is more than 100 and it overestimates if the rate is 60. So sometimes you can overventilate and underventilate. Pulse oximetry won't be accurate during the first 2 minutes of the life. So for the pulse oximetry, it is mainly for the oxygenation target. And after 2 minutes, you can use the pulse oximeter for heart rate monitoring. The gold standard is ECG. So as the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that the ECG monitoring is the gold standard. However, we know that in our practice, it is very difficult in a way to putting the ECG lead over the chest. And sometimes it is very difficult to, you are 1 or 2 person and one person would require to fix the ECG lead. So as of now, the NNF India suggests that auscultation is the method of choice for heart rate assessment. Yes, for prolonged resuscitation, if the baby is requiring chest compression, and if the baby is after 10 minutes of resuscitation, if there is no heart rate, to confirm the heart rate, ECG would be the ideal choice for assessment of the heart rate only. So let's start with the one case in a low risk infants. If we ask only one question, whether the baby is breathing or crying. If the answer is no, so that means as of now, that baby would go for initial steps and we won't do a delayed cord clamping. So clamp the cord immediately and start initial step TABC. And even after stimulations, if the baby is not breathing, gasping, apneic, and heart rate is less than 100, that baby would qualify for positive pressure ventilation. So immediately you have to apply the pulse oximeter. So the FGM is the first golden minute. That means you have to start positive pressure ventilation by 1 minute of life in any case. So you start with 5 breaths and look for the rising heart rate. If the heart rate is rising, if the answer is yes, then you have to complete the positive pressure ventilation for 30 seconds. If the heart rate is not rising, that means answer is no. So you look for chest rise. If the chest rise is not there, then you will go for the ventilation corrective steps. So in the ventilation corrective steps, there are 6 components, M, R, SOPA. So M means mask readjustment, R means repositioning, S means suctioning, O means opening of the mouth, P means increased pressure, A means alternative airway or intubations. So at one point of time, we will do one thing. That means Mr. M, mask readjustment and reposition. We'll give again a 5 breaths and look for the chest rise. If the answer is yes, then you will complete the 30 seconds of positive pressure ventilation. But still there is no chest rise, then you jump to SO. S means suctioning and O means opening. So in opening of my mouth, you have to enter one of your finger to open the mouth and then clear the mouth and then restart the positive pressure ventilation and look for chest rise. If the chest rise is there, if the answer is yes, then complete the steps from here for 30 seconds. If again there is no chest rise, then switch to PA, that means increased pressure or intubation. However, you can intubate the baby any point of time if you feel that the airway is compromised. So one of the things is that for mask adjustment in ventilation corrective steps, so it's better to do a 2-hand technique. So in that case, you need a one more helper, so who will give the positive pressure ventilation, and one of the resuscitator would fix the mask with the 2 hand. So by this method, you can prevent lot of leak. The third component is that third scenario is that if the baby is breathing and crying, if the answer is yes, then you will go for the positive pressure ventilation. You will go for the delayed cord clamping for the 60 seconds. If the answer is no, you will not do the delayed cord clamping. But what would be the best ventilation device, be it a self-inflating bag or TPC resuscitator? For all term infants, they both are fine. You can do resuscitations with self-inflating bag. However, in cases of preterm infants, if you use TPC resuscitator, including a PEEP device, PEEP device, it was found that using PEEP device can lead to less need of intubation in preterm infants and less FiO2 need. We know that the preterm are at higher risk of developing chronic lung disease and bronchopulmonary dysplasia. So using this somehow can prevent a lot of intubations and decrease FiO2 need. We know that the high FiO2 can lead to the oxidant injury, which can also lead to bronchopulmonary dysplasia. So third scenario, baby is breathing, crying, answer is yes. Go for delayed cord clamping irrespective of gestational age. And soon after birth, if the baby develops respiratory distress, so what should be the treatment strategy at delivery room? Should we intubate the baby? Should we give a CPAP? So in that case, so idea is that if you in a spontaneously breathing baby with respiratory distress, if you start with liver room delivery CPAP, it can prevent lots of intubation in the range of 50%, and ultimately it can prevent chronic lung disease. So one of the study they have found that in meta-analysis they have found that if you treat 20 to 25 infants with CPAP, you can prevent one chronic lung disease. So to start CPAP in delivery room with spontaneously breathing baby with respiratory distress with a CPAP of 6 centimeter water, which can prevent the intubation. So the third scenario, meconium. So again, you would ask that whether the baby is breathing and crying. That means baby is vigorous. If the baby is vigorous, go for delayed cord clamping and continue routine care over the mother's abdomen and continue all the steps of TABC. However, if the baby is not breathing or crying, what we call is a non-vigorous. So previously we were intubating the baby for suctioning purposes, but the recent few studies from the India, they have found that even in the non-vigorous baby, you start doing initial steps and by the end of initial step, if the baby is still not breathing, start doing positive pressure ventilation and no tracheal suction is advised. If you look at this 4 studies, mainly from the India, they have found that tracheal suction versus no suctioning, they have found that there was no difference in the mortality and meconium aspiration syndrome. That is why in the year 2015, the AAP guidelines have changed the recommendation for doing tracheal suction in a non-vigorous baby. And recently, NNF India guideline 2019 also suggests that we should not intubate and do suction in a patient with non-vigorous baby. However, we know that. So because if you're doing tracheal suction, it can delay in onset of positive pressure ventilation. So you can delay in first golden moment of starting positive pressure ventilations. So one of the studies from which was published by Chirovell in Pediatrics 2018, they compared the new technique, that is no routine suctioning, versus their old pattern of using tracheal suction. What they have found, when they compared the old data from the new one, they found that the risk of NICU admission, oxygen therapy, mechanical ventilation, surfactant therapy were higher, in the range of 2 to 5 times higher in infant where the no tracheal suctions were done. And as well as meconium aspiration syndrome were higher as compared to infant where tracheal suction were not done. And one of the studies from the Vermont Oxford data, they have also found when they compared 2017 data versus 2013, when the tracheal suction was a routine, they found that there was increased risk of moderate to severe HI. So probably we need a more multicentric randomized controlled trial with a larger sample size to say confirmly that whether the routine tracheal suction should be done or not. Probably in next few years we'll get the answer, but as of now, we will not do any tracheal suction in a non-vigorous baby. What about the preterm infants if they are less than 32 weeks? What should be the bundle? So in infants less than 32 weeks, we know that there should not be cord milking because milking can lead to increased IVs. We can continue delayed cord clamping. We should maintain a temperature. Temperature is just not about using the warmer and the warm linen, but we have to use a multiple thing like using plastic wrap, the cap, and as well as the thermal mattress, because this is the new guideline has given an immense importance of temperature maintenance, because for every degree below 36.5 degrees Celsius, the mortality risk increased by 28 to 30%. So temperature has been given an immense importance. For breathing problem, if the baby is having respiratory distress, or requiring resuscitation, use TPC resuscitator. And if the baby develop distress soon after birth, start delivery room nasal CPAP, which can prevent the intubation rate. And if the baby is less than 32 weeks, then and then you should start resuscitating the baby with a 21 to 30% of the FiO2. And in case if the baby is more than 32 weeks, we can start resuscitating just with room air. Now, we know that only few infants, few means only less than 1% of the infant would require advanced resuscitation. Advanced resuscitation meaning by need for chest compression, need for endotracheal intubation requiring epinephrine, and sometimes normal saline boluses. So if the baby is not breathing or crying, if the answer is no, and even after initial steps, baby is apneic, gasping, heart rate less than 100, attach pulse oximeter, give effective positive pressure ventilation for 30 seconds. And even after that, if the heart rate is still less than 60 beats per minute, that baby would qualify for chest compression. So that means there are certain prerequisites to start chest compression. So these prerequisite is that we have to start using 100% FiO2. If not intubated, please intubate the infant. Change the position of the resuscitator. That means those who are going to intubate, who are going to do for the chest compression, they should stand near head in, and the resuscitator who is going to give a positive pressure ventilation, they would stand aside of the infant. And we know that at the time of chest compression, that means the cardiac output would be very less. So even the pulse oximeter and the auscultation and the palpation would not lead to monitoring of the accurate heart rate monitoring. So in that case, you probably need an ECG attachment to the baby if possible. By this method, you can accurately get a heart rate, accurate heart rate. What about the intubation? So we know that at any time we can intubate the baby. If we feel that the airway is compromised, if it is blocking, if it is not clear even after suctioning, we can intubate the infant. So, so what is the ideal insertion length of the endotracheal tube? So for calculation for tip to lip length, the length should be calculated from the nasal septum up to the tragus, which is known as an NTL, nasotragus length, plus 1 centimeter. That means at that depth, you have to insert the endotracheal tube. And another parameter by which we can select the endotracheal insertion length by using gestational age and birth weight, and we have already charts available. In the delivery room area, we only need 2.5, 3.5 French endotracheal tube. Nowadays, we don't need and don't intubate with a 4 French endotracheal tube. And some of the baby would require epinephrine. We know that there are two routes, endotracheal and umbilical venous, and the umbilical venous is considered to be the preferred route. And we know the dose of the endotracheal and the umbilical venous epinephrine, the dose of 1:10,000, 0.1 to 0.3 ml per kg through umbilical venous, and 0.5 to 1 ml per kg through endotracheal tube. But if you are giving endotracheal epinephrine, if you look at this graph, you find that the peak level of plasma concentration of epinephrine achieved at around 10 minutes if you give endotracheal epinephrine. However, if you give a umbilical venous epinephrine, the plasma concentration achieved within 2 minutes. And by the time the baby shifted to the NICU, that added epinephrine can lead to hypercontractility of the heart and sometimes tachycardia. So because we know that the endotracheal epinephrine is very poorly absorbed and it is not effective. That is why repeated endotracheal epinephrine is not been recommended, and the guidelines suggest that even if you have given the endotracheal epinephrine, you consider it as a 0 dose. Just insert the umbilical catheter and give umbilical venous dose of epinephrine. And multiple doses can be hazardous. So avoid giving a multiple doses of endotracheal epinephrine. Only one dose is suffice, and we should not repeat the endotracheal dose. The second thing is that after giving umbilical venous epinephrine, we give a 1 ml normal saline bolus. Recently, one of the pig model found that if you give 1 ml bolus after epinephrine, that epinephrine would reach just near the liver only, because we want to reach the epinephrine to heart, nearby heart. However, if you give a bolus dosage of normal saline of in around 10 ml, then this epinephrine reaches around the heart rate. Probably the current guideline, which suggests that we should use the bolus of 0.5 to 1 ml probably it is not the current one. However, probably most of us are giving more and more boluses, so probably that's why we are not getting such finding. So the recent study suggests that we should use flush 3 ml per kg, 5 to 10 ml, especially in a term infant, not 1 ml. Please, this is the new study, so it is not being adopted by any of the group, by neither by the NNF nor by the American Academy of Pediatrics. But let's discuss about what is new in the resuscitation guideline. And one thing is that endotracheal versus umbilical venous, because we know that the putting umbilical venous catheter would require, you need a catheter. Sometimes we don't have the catheter. Many of the centers, they are using the orogastric tube. There is some concern with the expertise, because some of the healthcare worker, those who are not pediatrician and not doctor, they are, it is very difficult to insert umbilical venous catheter, and sometimes it can reach only the low level and it takes lots of time. So recently in the animal model, they found that we can directly insert the needle through the umbilical vein and can inject the epinephrine only, and it is probably more effective as compared to umbilical venous catheter if it is not at the right place. So probably in future we would see some changes in the guidelines of giving epinephrine, giving the boluses of normal saline after epinephrine, and the route of epinephrine and a method of administering epinephrine in case of resuscitations. So in the pig model, they have found how to give epinephrine directly into the umbilical cord, umbilical veins, and followed by milking. So there are certain timeline during the assessment. We know that immediately after birth, we just note the time, and after first minute, one of the guidelines are, that means the first minute is important, that is golden minute. We follow the delayed cord clamping in all well-born baby, and the FGM, first golden minute, we have to start positive pressure ventilations. Now after 5 inflation, you check heart rate during the positive pressure ventilation. Once the positive pressure ventilation is effective, you continue it for 30 seconds, and after 60 seconds you check heart rate during the positive pressure ventilation and coordinated chest compression, and every 3 to 5 minutes to give adrenaline in cases if it is required. So these are the timelines which is very important at the time of resuscitation. And let's discuss about the mother who are suspected COVID, or who are either suspected or COVID positive. In that case, what should be the resuscitation guideline? So there are 4 things. One is the place of delivery, personnel, equipment, and space. So place of delivery should be definitely separated from the routine delivery room area, and ideally it should be a negative pressure room. We know that in most of the places in our country, there is no separate negative pressure room. So we can use any of the room, even if there is no negative pressure. So immediately when the patient comes, you should apply the mask. We need a trained personnel, and minimum personnel would be required because we don't want to expose everyone with the aerosol. And we need equipment as per the need of the resuscitation. We all need for all the components of the TA, B, C, D, and separate space. So there could be 2 things. Either one is the operation theater, and there should be a separate resuscitation area. The moment baby is received by one of the staff, they would shift the baby from that room to another resuscitation area to prevent the any aerosol exposures. However, it is very difficult to get 2 separate rooms for the resuscitation, and logistically it would be difficult. So probably this is more acceptable that in the same room, try to keep the resuscitation trolley away from the mother, at least keep a distance of around 2 meters, 6 feet, and use one of the screen that we use in the labor room area or delivery room, so that we can create a space, separate space for the newborn. And we have to fully prepare. We have to use all the components of the PPE that include the hood, the N95 mask, the goggles, the visor, and the full aprons also. And if the baby is immediately cried and breathing or crying, what should be the policy? Should we follow the skin-to-skin contact or delayed cord clamping or not? So initially WHO and CDC recommended that we should follow the skin-to-skin contact and the delayed cord clamping. The initial guideline by the NNF and the FOXI, they have recommended that we should not use delayed cord clamping and the skin-to-skin contact, but the recently revised guideline in the month of 7th May 2020, they have recommended that if the baby is breathing and crying, we should follow delayed cord clamping and the skin-to-skin contact, both. And what about the umbilical cord banking? We know that many of the centers are following this umbilical cord banking because it is the patient's discretion. So far we know that none of these respiratory diseases are typically not transmitted by the human cells, and currently there are no reported cases of transmission of COVID-19 by blood product. So therefore umbilical cord banking can be continued after one-to-one discussion. That definitely it is a shared responsibility. So one can follow the cord banking also. So what about the resuscitation? Again, we ask for one question: breathing or crying. If the answer is yes, continue delayed cord clamping, skin to skin contact. And if the answer is no, so we'll start with initial steps that we all know, that TABC. And for the airway clearance, probably avoid repeated suctioning or unnecessary suctioning, because we know that these are the aerosol generating procedure and they can lead to a lot of infection transmission. So if the baby requires, if any baby would require suctioning, so try to keep your face away from the mouth area of the infants and can do suctioning also. And we know that only 3% baby would require need for positive pressure ventilation. And however, it is not because of the COVID, because the mother is, if the mother is having ARDS and mother is having hypoxia, so that hypoxia can lead to fetal hypoxia, and probably that can lead to perinatal depression of the infant, and probably that would be the reason for initiating resuscitation, not the COVID-19 infection. And the recent data have suggested that in 80% of the case, in 24% of the cases, baby was born preterm because of the prematurity and because of the delivery of by the cesarean section. Many of the baby would require some form of resuscitation. It is not because of the COVID-19. And when we start positive pressure ventilation, so that means if your mask is not appropriately fit, the secretions can disperse from this area, and they can, that means it's an aerosol generating procedure, they can transmit the transmission. However, if you compare with the adult, the dispersion of this particle, the secretion from the mouth, is not more than 1 to 2 centimeter from the mouth area, whereas in the adult that dispersion can go up to 30 to 90 centimeter. That means it is not that contagious, and it cannot transmit to the lot of the spaces, lot distances. So we also know the tidal volume of the infant is very low, that is 4 to 6 ml per kg. So that would be less transmissible as compared to adult resuscitation with bag and mask ventilations. So there are certain indications where we can intubate the patient. There are certain suggestions that probably we would need a filter. So if you apply this filter in between the bag and mask, they can be used. But the concern is that they contain a lot of dead space in the range of 13 to 30 ml. We know that if the dead space is increased, that means the CO2 would be high, and that high CO2, hypercapnia and hypercarbia, can lead to brain damage. Theoretically, it can lead to brain damage. So far, it is not being commonly practiced during the time of resuscitation. So this is a new thing, so we all don't know. And at the time of transmitting the baby, we should cover either using plastic wrap or polythene wrap, or if you have the incubator, better transport the baby into the incubator and shift to the NICU separate message. So certain do's and don'ts while doing the resuscitation: wear full PPE if you are attending a resuscitation of cases of, in fact, nowadays we don't know, because of the community transmission, we can consider all resuscitation falling under a suspect cases. So we should wear full PPE, because we should know that here the mother is the source and not the baby. You know that all of the studies have shown that the amniotic fluid and the blood, the secretions, they don't contain the COVID virus. Only one study from Iran, they found that the amniotic fluid contained the SARS-CoV positive virus. So you have to keep yourself away from the mother and not the baby. Follow NRP India guideline as recently published by the FOXI and the CPG guidelines. You can use self-inflating bag or TPs. There is some suggestion that probably we can use microcuff endotracheal tube to prevent the dispersion of the aerosols. Sometimes we can use the HEPA filter and shift the baby in the closed incubator. Avoid suction. Don't give endotracheal adrenaline. Better use umbilical venous adrenaline injections, because if you are giving endotracheal adrenaline, again there is a risk of aerosol generating procedures which can lead to transmission of the disease. Avoid repeated discontinuations from the endotracheal tube. So to summarize all these things, For routine care, we should follow delayed cord clamping irrespective of the gestation, no milking, especially in the extreme preterm infant, because of there is a risk of intraventricular hemorrhage. Effective ventilation is the key, and to know the effective ventilation, the rising heart rate is the best thing. And to know to check the heart rate, as per the NNF recommendation, we should follow the auscultation. ECG required in cases of chest compression, or if you want to discontinue resuscitation, if you want to declare the baby. In cases of non-vigorous meconium stent like no tracheal suctioning, we should follow just and start positive pressure ventilation within 1 minute. Start resuscitating all the infants if they are 32 weeks and beyond 32 weeks with a room air. Just during the time of chest compression, intubate the baby, give FiO2 with 100%, use thumb technique to thumb technique, epinephrine, avoid multiple intratracheal dose of epinephrine. In cases of COVID suspect, use complete PPE, skin to skin contact and delayed cord clamping can be followed. Avoid suctioning, avoid giving intratracheal adrenaline. Thank you. Thank you very much.